Hi everyone, welcome back again to another video of the Middlegame series. Remember the last video where we talked through the framework on how top players might be finding their moves, plans, and tactics based on knowledge and tactical motif? The last chapter we went quite in-depth for pin, definitely check that out, but today we'll be talking about deflection. It's quite a cool name though, but essentially it's the technique to force your opponent's pieces to move when it doesn't want to. So we're making them move, if you will. To put things into perspective, I prepared this position to get you excited for a bit. This is a random puzzle that I found online, but trying to find a move that is based on a tactical motif of deflection that can immediately win the game for white despite being down so many materials. Ready? Can you find it? In 3, 2, 1, the answer is Queen to H5. Now, isn't Queen to H5 the most satisfying move to play? Black has so many materials to capture, but neither of them can capture because it's checkmate. For example, if Queen takes on H5, it's Rook to F8 checkmate. The same will occur if Rook takes F5, Queen to E8 is checkmate. So really in my opinion, the best irony yet. It is also rather difficult that the extra pieces that Black has are all stuck on the other side of the board while the King is under fire here on H8. In essence stuck in a corner, so how should Black continue? If Pawn to G6, we play Rook takes F8 and Bishop takes G6 and we're still threatening mate. You might think that Queen to G7 stops that mate, but still we have another resource, Bishop to F6. This is another deflection. After the Queen takes, this is another checkmate on H7. Obviously if King move, we just take the Queen, checkmate follows as well. So this is no good. Now if Black plays Pawn to H6, this is still no good for this position because we can send a piece down to a pit of hell just to open up more position for our pieces. We can play in this position, Bishop takes on H6. Crazy stuff, we have 3 pieces hanging, but none of the captures are possible without hanging checkmate. For example, Pawn takes H6, we have Queen takes H6 check, and after King to G8, this is checkmate. After Queen takes, Queen H7. Again, this Bishop on C2 actually helps on this long diagonal to deliver checkmate. Again, I believe everybody sees if Rook takes F5, then Queen takes on E8 check. The Rook will also be dead next turn. Also, the obvious Queen takes H5 falls to Rook takes F8, that's direct checkmate. And so there's really nothing that Black could do besides playing this move King to G8 just to hope for a defensive resource. But then we can already release everything. We'll play Rook takes F8 check. And after the King takes, Bishop takes G7, another deflection by the way. Because after King takes G7, we capture the Queen on E8. We win the game. Every piece on the Queen side still not active yet. And we have a Bishop and the Queen trying to checkmate Black anytime soon. If King to E7 just to protect the Queen, we lure the King out. Even after King to D6 is played, we play Queen to F4 check. Obviously you can go to E6, but Queen to F6 check, King to D5. We have Bishop to B3 check. Again, this is nothing good. Even this is checkmate here on F3. So that's basically just to show you the possibility of the deflection tactic if you spot them in a game. I don't know if that gets you excited, but let's move on to the next one then. Now the second game is still a smaller scale game. It's not really some super grandmaster game. Nonetheless, there's still something that we can extract from this game. The game continues with white exchanges off every rook on the board, diminishing the chances of winning for both sides. Because you know, exchanging pieces blah 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 is never good for winning chances. But then, Black does not feel that way. In this position, he plans out Pawn to C5. This is a great move to begin with. And also not the first move that comes to everybody's mind, especially the beginners and intermediates' mind. But the idea is very simple really. The move Pawn to C5 puts a possibility the Bishop will actually move to C6, attacking the Queen, or this long diagonal in general. But also if Pawn takes C5, we can play Bishop takes C5, and look at our Bishop aiming on the Queen side like this. But is this already winning for Black? Well, not quite close yet. In fact, this position is just better until White plays Queen to E2. Theoretically, it does not offer to protect anything, as the Queen was on F3. And here it just allows Black for a beautiful tactic. Can you spot it then? Now Black plays Bishop takes F2 check. Interesting sacrifice really, but this is also deflection. After Queen takes F2, there is Queen takes C4. But okay, what if the King takes on F2 then? We also have Knight to G4 check. We have our Bishop on C6, that's check. The King can't move any of this square, and it'll be forced for the Queen to sacrifice itself on E4. This is no good. And so King to F1 is the only move. But then we still have Queen takes C4. This is another deflection for White, because after the Queen takes, Knight E3, and the Queen still loses itself on C4. Now the net material gain is a pawn, but with pieces this is active compared to the one that is sitting behind in the last rank. Obviously Black went on to win as White resigns in this position. So really in your position, everything might seem like equal when pieces comes off the board, but then you have to always consider what your pieces can do at the moment on the board. No matter how small the chances are, you should always bring them to the more active square to target pieces and target the king. And just in this position, when white steps on e2, black encounters a tactic that immediately finishes the game. What a nice turnaround of an event, when everybody thinks that exchanging pieces off are bad news for winning chances. The third position I got from the rapid game of Leech's users. I think I'm allowed to share this since the account is dead for some time. The first glance of this position though seems like white is in a lot of trouble just because of these, right? There's a constant pressure on f2 square, and so if white's not careful, the pawn will be lost. Also the king is not castled, and so if black starts to bring the rook over the pieces to play, I think white will have a difficult time defending and will even lose the game as a result. So in essence, we can just evaluate this position as slightly worse for white. But white is not without its merit, you know. The bishop here on h8 looking at its diagonal, and also the rook, if open, can help to deliver checkmate. Can you imagine it? If the pawn is lost, we can just place the rook on h8 and that will be checkmate. So again, this seems like a puzzle. You can pause the video to really find the move that accentuates the tactical motif of deflection. I think this game is very nice if you can find it. In this position, it's important to find rook to d1. The idea of which is still not difficult. The rook's trying to control the open file. It is also eyeing down the possibility that they can bring the rook to d5 on a good day to help, the other rook on h4 to attack on h5, deliver the checkmate on h8 as we talk about, right? And just for interesting information, black will have been okay if he plays rook to d8, maintaining his slight advantage. And then perhaps it will be difficult for white to move again, because obviously, you don't want to exchange off your good attacker, but then we also don't want to play an inactive move such as pawn to a4 or pawn to b4 in this position, although perhaps rather forced. So rook to d8 would have been better for black. But again, both of these players are 1700 in the Leech's server, and so it's not really surprising for black to play pawn to b5 first. But this allows a tactic that we talked about earlier, which is rook to d5. Because we're just throwing our rooks away, the idea is after queen takes on d5, the queen no longer protects the square on g4. And so queen takes g4. Isn't that crazy? After pawn takes, now we have rook h8 checkmate. We're down so many materials, but we're able to win the game by delivering a checkmate. So black cannot take that way. Let's just say he goes king to f8. Then we take with the rook. Of course, the queen is more expensive than the knight, so to speak. So the queen has to move. But then there's another move for white we can play. Can you find it? And that is queen to g8, check. Crazy stuff. Deflecting the king to g8 so we can checkmate him on h8. Now obviously the king has the right to step away, but still queen to g5. And this is just checkmate. Not much hope for black either here. And isn't it cool that this knight does not even have to move a single inch, even if it's attacked on c4. We don't have to move it with a checkmate threat if we're able to find it. Or rather, if we want to spend time to find it. But it really isn't possible if he doesn't play rook to d1 first. The last game is a game that is more lit. This is between Ivan Sokolov and Luke McShane, but this is just really to show you that deflection can also be used in a defense. In this position, we can't really say that white is already better, but indeed he has the initiative on the queen side with the rook doubling up like this. Yes, black will have the a file, but as you can see in the next series of move, white really has his pieces trying to eye down the queen side, while black's the one who reacts to every move that white's made. This bishop to e5 move to stop e4 from coming to e5, this bishop to c6 to blunt the bishop on f3. So it all makes sense. It's not saying that black's worse though, it's just saying that white has a lot more initiative than black in this position. So the game continues with white trying to play bishop to g4, attacking the rook on c8. However, Luke McShane plays e6 to just blunt the bishop and also attacks the knight on e6. After rook to b6 though, harassing the bishop on c6. Luke McShane could have played pawn to h5, kicking away the bishop. Let's say if the bishop moves somewhere to f3 or e2, we could have taken the knight here on e6. Let's put down the board, pawn to h5. If the bishop moves back to f3, we take on d5, we could have been winning. But for some reason, even for top grandmasters, they can also miss this move and place king to g7. The problem for this move is that it allows the move pawn to f4. We can't even move the bishop back because of the knight takes. We would like to take with our king, but then queen to d6 with bishop to d4, next move is checkmate. So in the game, black plays bishop to a4, just trying to find counterplay. But after the queen move, the bishop is still hanging on e5. And so bishop to a1, the only safe square that we can see in this position. But just after a few moves, when white has enough material, enough pressure in this position, black resign. Obviously, if queen takes c5, knight takes d7, this is a check that gives you a fork with the queen as well. This is no for black, and he just resigned a move earlier. So just to show you that deflection can also be used when you're trying to defend a position. Of course, we've talked about this again and again. Black's not worse in his position. It's just that white has a lot more initiative when the rook's going down like this and one piece is aiming at the queen side. And so really tactics can appear even though you seem like you're worse in a position. It seems like you're defending and reacting to every move that your opponents play. Speaking of which, is there a deflection that you like the most from chess history? The one I like the most is the game of century between Bobby Fischer and also Donald Bryan. We also talk about that in our video, so do check that out if you want to. But in my opinion, that is the best deflection game that is probably very famous without the introduction itself. But if you haven't checked that out, be sure to look up the game. I promise you it'll be an exciting game. And yeah, signing off from here. If you enjoyed the video, if you learned something from the video, please drop a like button. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.